if you have the gumption and you have the drive to do it, and you can find a supportive network, then you can really have some fun.
Yeah,
you can really
I
do
agree.
some stuff and be innovative. And it's like, I grew up in New York. There's no way you could do that kind of stuff. You can never just get past the sanitary workers or, whatever.
Right.
Like you wouldn't be able to get through the unions and everything else. And here it's like, it really is wide open. We have an incredible opportunity.
Hey, Big Ideas Raleigh listeners. I'm Dan Bagley, your friendly neighborhood enthusiast and proud City of Raleigh employee. I'm so glad you're here because today we're recording at one of Raleigh's beautiful recreation facilities inside the Halifax Community Center. And if you haven't been out here, let me tell you, this is one of the city's gems. We're here joined by two special guests who are going to share some big ideas in the city of Oaks. One guest centered around parks, recreation, and cultural resources, and the other guest centered around a special neighborhood who's pretty awesome at creating a lot of recreational fun and often invites the whole city to participate. Joining me on this incredible journey is someone who knows a thing or two about unraveling stories. One of our executive producers, Dr. Sarah Glova, an experienced podcast host, reporter, and producer who's helping to launch this podcast.
Hey, Dan, thanks for the warm welcome. And hello from the Halifax Community Center. How cool is it that we get to be here today?
Yeah, I know, it's great, isn't it? And it's great to have you here with us, Sarah. Stephen Bentley, Director, Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, with a career spanning more than 2 decades in public service. Mr. Bentley's work in the park space is known for inclusion, empowerment, and collaboration. Stephen, welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Sarah. Looking forward to talking with you today about Raleigh.
Next, we have Aly Khalifa, Raleigh resident of the Kirby-Beaulieu neighborhood, co-founder and chief innovation officer of Positive Company. Aly is an expert in sustainable design and innovation with over 30 years of experience in designing engineering and manufacturing unique technologies around the world. Welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here with you guys.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but to break the ice, we usually like to jump in with a little game we call 2 facts and a false. What's going to happen is you have to decide what the false statement is out of the 3. But to spice it up a little bit, you're going to be going against Sarah.
Dun, dun,
Okay.
dun.
So, are you guys ready to play?
Yes, so you're going to
ready.
tell us 3 things.
I'm going to tell you 3.
And we're going to pick which one is false. And
Right.
I hope our listeners will play along.
Yes, that is my hope as well. So, listeners, if you're there, here we go. A. In September 1937, John Muir walked from West Virginia to Florida, which he recounted in his book, A 500-Mile Walk to the Gulf. He had no specific route chosen except to stay close to water by creeks, rivers, and canals.
Okay.
That's A.
Okay, all right.
B. John Muir, famous parks historian, is known as John of the Mountains and father of the American National Parks, as well as the patron saint of the American wilderness. Or C. John Muir founded the Sierra Club, which is an acclaimed American conservation organization. All right, those are your 3 choices. We're going to let our experts go first.
Okay.
I feel like if I get this wrong, I am totally set up for failure.
Yeah, I
have a clue.
apologize.
I have a clue.
You do have a good
Yeah.
clue.
Yep.
Okay.
The first one is false.
That was going to be my guess too.
That was
Only
your guess?
because I feel like somebody, clearly we have a parks themed person that we're talking about. And so B and C seem very in line with what a parks person would be known as. And so
Yeah.
that I'm going with A.
Okay.
I'm throwing myself in with Steven.
All right, Ollie.
Yeah, the patron saint kind of
Yeah, that throws me off a little bit,
because
but-
that's
Yeah.
kind of an official designation
It is,
there
it
that
is.
I'm not sure
So
I can square up
the
easily.
National Park Service started in 1917, I think. And this is like his era. I know he started the Sierra Club. Like that's...
Okay, yeah, you
That's-
were correct.
yeah,
That one,
that's a given.
So it's between...
But I know he wrote some books. Like he and Frederick Law Olmsted did these
Olmsted, another great name.
amazing, like, I'm just going to go and walk for whatever and then write about it. And we're all reading about it today. So that's what throws me off. But
it's more than 500 miles, isn't it?
yeah, and he like helped fight for Yosemite, which is the first national.
We're getting a deep
going with
dive
A.
into
We're
some
going with
parks
A.
history. Okay.
You are correct.
Yes,
Good
we
job.
got it.
That is
We
right.
found
Okay.
the false.
John Muir, born April 21st, 1838 in Dunbar, Scotland, and died December 24th, 1914 in Los Angeles, California. He was a Scottish-born American naturalist, writer, and advocate for U.S. forest conservation. In September 1867, John walked 1,000 miles from Indiana to Florida, which he recounted in his book, A 1,000-Mile Walk to the Gulf. He had no specific route chosen except to go by the wildest, leafiest, and least trodden way he could find.
Wow.
Leafiest.
Leafiest.
That is a
I
great
would've said
descriptor.
that.
I want to use
Green.
that.
I do too. I want to start finding the
Very
leafiest way to
leafy.
get to things.
I like this neighborhood. It's leafy.
Yeah.
This is the leafiest neighborhood.
Wow, I'm proud of us for finding the false. I might have relied on Stephen a little bit. And just to be clear, my notes do not have the
Yeah,
answer.
I was going to
we
say
pull-
you have
No,
piles of
no,
pages
We
over
do
there.
specific notes for each other.
Okay.
So-
Okay.
If you're watching on
No
video, I'm
cheating.
holding up my notes. You can see there is no answer here. So good on us.
I do have to say, Stephen, your knowledge of Muir is actually pretty on point. Well done.
One of the few things I'll remember from college.
All right. Well, now we'd like to jump into this discussion a little bit more. But before we do, we need to know a little bit more about you guys and what do you do? So, Stephen, let's start with you. As the Director of Parks and Recreation and Cultural Resources, what's the day-to-day?
No 2 days are alike, which makes the job exciting. And we do things from pre-K programs to active adults and the arts. So every day I get to work on something fabulous. And if I say in my job, what do? I focus on providing people with cool opportunities either to be indoors or outdoors to experience who they want to be, either at that point as an adult or as a child later in life.
That's great. That's great. And Aly, how about you? How would you explain your role and your company to someone who doesn't have any background into what you do?
Well, I come from a design and engineering background from NC State and have been working a lot on sustainable design for many years. Now I'm thinking about how to get it to the next level and how to help train other designers, the next generation of designers, to start focusing on how to do positive things. So we lived in Australia for a few years and were there through the bushfire crisis. And my wife and I, who've been working together for years, decided that from now on, we don't want to make rich people richer through our work, but we want to just have a positive impact, which we've been working towards. But now we're really focused very much on that. So I spent Earth Day this year in Taiwan on a rooftop of a factory, just being able to start tracking energy usage per product so we can start giving designers feedback loops on how are you doing. And I'm obsessed with the idea of carbon budgets, that unless we all get a carbon budget, we're just not going to get there on climate.
Can you explain what a carbon budget is a little bit more for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so, we all have a financial budget, and like, let's say a designer even has a financial budget. You got to make this for X, amount of dollars. Well, we know that with climate change that there are targets out there. So if we want to hit 1.5 centigrade climate change, which is not great, and it's maybe not even possible at this point anymore, that we have to reduce how much carbon goes into the air. So Science Based Targets Initiative has a budget for us. The problem is they're like nationwide budgets, and no one really knows how to deal with it. And then most feedback loops to designers and everyone takes 3 years maybe before they find out if they did good or not. So what I'm trying to do now is give instantaneous feedback by giving metrics from machines so that designers on their phone can say, oops, I got to do better than that.
That's incredible.
I heard in your introduction too, we mentioned your neighborhood. So I wanted to hear too about that.
Yeah, so I'm coming up pretty close to finishing the 30-year mortgage. I've been living there for 30 years.
Congratulations.
On Kirby Street. And at the time, it was a very different environment than it is now. The mental hospital was still operating.
Yeah, where is, for folks who aren't familiar?
It's between Pullen Park and Dorothea Dix Park. So we're kind of nestled between, and it's actually like a triangle. And the other side is Centennial Campus and the Catholic diocese that's there. So we're just kind of like this little secluded neighborhood. I think we're 29 structures now. So it's basically one square block, and it's a really tight-knit neighborhood. I mean, we all have keys to half each other's houses to take care of animals and help each other out. And yeah, it's just a wonderful place to be.
That's wonderful. And wow, almost 30 years in Raleigh. That practically makes you a native by standards around here with how many folks
Oh,
we
yeah,
have
I was
moving
here
in.
since 86, so it goes even before
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So,
Wow,
yeah.
love it. So
Now
you've
I'm
seen
just
lots of
telling
versions
I'm
of
old.
Raleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been here 20. At what point do I get that badge of you're a Raleighite?
That's a good question. I don't feel like I'm a fair judge of that. I moved here in high school, so we'll have to ask. I have a few friends who were born and raised here, and I will ask them, at what point are you considered a Raleighite?
I define it as where you have lived longest. So I moved here in 2000.
Okay.
So I've lived here 24 years. And I grew up in my parents' house for 18. So I only lived in my hometown, quote hometown, for 18 years. Because once I went to college, I was like,
You were out of that hometown.
yeah,
huh?
I was like, I love you both.
Where you lived the longest. Well, whether it's where we've lived the longest or where we are right now, I know we're all big fans of the city. And I have to tell you, I've been so excited to dive into this episode because parks are such a big part of my life. But I know that the part of parks that I experience is such a small part of what there is at parks.
Yeah, this is a big conversation. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how you guys, condense that into, 45 minutes.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
I thought this was 4 hours.
So let's start with this question. Now that, we've learned a bit about your work, we'd really like to know, what's your big idea that you're working on right now? And Stephen, can you kick us off?
Sure. I don't know if I have the one big idea, but we have a few going on. And I thought about this for this conversation. Every 10 years, we update what the outlook for the vision of the Parks Department and the park system looks like. And we have great staff. We do a lot of community engagement and discussion with group members, whether it be organized where you come to an open house or we just do a pop-up at a playground or out in front of a grocery store. And this overarching theme that we've heard in this update of our plan is around public health. So in the past, it was like, want more greenways, want more gymnasiums, want more swimming pools. So our plans were always focused on like assets, like we're going to plan for assets. So our team now has shifted our vision and focus around this plan should focus on being health-centric. So the individual, like your mental and social health, which we all learned during the pandemic, the importance of public spaces. So if you think about it in like 3 rings, the next ring would be community health. So making sure you know your neighbors. And I would love to live in a neighborhood where I could say, here's my keys, right? And I have a close neighborhood, but I still don't know my neighbors, right? And I think that's something Parks and Recreation can do through classes and making sure we're facilitating opportunities for neighborhoods to get together. And then the third is like this bigger like the ecosystem level. Like Raleigh's park system is the lungs and like the sponge for rain and air. So how are we serving a system, not just protecting what we have, but making sure it's at a level in which it can support this growth and the climate change and resilience that we're experiencing. So in a roundabout way, our 10-year plan used to be very plannerish.
Right.
It is now softening this approach and saying, hey, do you agree Raleigh Park System should give everybody the opportunity to live a happy, healthy life? And that could be through creativity, right? It could be the arts or history and learning. So we're going to broaden what our definition of health as a park system is. So I'm excited about that. We'll be talking with our council in a couple of months.
And is that 10-year plan, is that something that the parks that your department has, or is this something that like all the departments have?
So Raleigh Parks has one, but most departments in the city have some outlook. So if you're in Raleigh Water, you're looking at the projection on when we're going to need to either build a lake or have a new water supply. Transportation does the same thing for like transit projections on buses or how wide the road should be and sidewalks should be. So, and we do ours every, it's aspirational. It looks out 20 years, but we really target what can we accomplish in 10.
That makes sense. So the Parks, Rec, and Cultural Resources Plan, and that's different. Just I'm like the non-city employee,
Sure.
so I have to
Yeah,
make sure I'm using the terms right. That's different from the comprehensive plan.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's
it's a
something else.
subsidiary of it. So
It
when the
is,
council says we love this plan, we then go back to the city's comprehensive plan and amend everything in the big comprehensive plan to say
That makes sense.
it's reflective of what the aspirations are from a park system level.
And before we jump from this and go to Aly, parks, recreation, and cultural resources. I mean, it's very unique, and I've always found that to be one of the amazing names within most parks and recreation departments throughout the country. Why cultural resources? How did that come to play?
That's a great question, and I get asked that a lot. Probably one of the top questions when we'll put a little asterisk, what's cultural resources mean? Well, it means a lot to a lot of people, but over time, the last 10 years, we've really grown. We've taken on the Office of Raleigh Arts, so we have amazing staff from Sarah Powers and Kelly McChesney in our Office of Raleigh Arts. So that came to the Parks Department from the manager's office, and then we started with one historic site, Historic Mordecai, and we've grown that to historic Moore Square and historic Nash Square. Our city was actually designed around 4 squares, so we consider those 2 of the most important public spaces in all of Raleigh. And we also have the Pope Museum, and we're going to be expanding the John P. Top Green Center to be an African-American cultural center. So the last 10 years, we went from like one historic site to saying, wait, we should be honoring and telling the real stories of
amazing.
Raleigh. We just cut the ribbon on the historic Latta Plantation Park, which was a small university site in the Oberlin Village. So those are park system assets. So it's great. I have artists, historians, your traditional health and wellness people. So yeah, that's the cultural portion
It's
of the
so
department.
interesting because to your point, if you look around at other cities, I don't think a lot of other cities have that title. I could be wrong. We could do a survey, see. But when you describe it that way, Stephen, the umbrella makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to me. And when
It all fits together.
It all fits together, especially under that mission of the 3 rings that you talked about and that community connection all the way up to ecosystem health.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Aly, same question. What's a really big idea that you're working on right now?
Imposter syndrome. I mean, that was intense. That was beautiful.
I often have it, believe me.
No, I mean, it was really nice to hear like those 3 different levels. And I think that resonates a lot with the way I think about parks. I mean, I am not a parks professional. I'm a parks user, you know, and I really love that. I mean, you know, before, we'll probably talk about some of the neighborhood events we did, but I learned a lot about the city of Raleigh through SparkCon. So that was a festival that we had started that, you know, ultimately grew to 80,000 people in downtown Raleigh. And it was just a really big event. And it was interesting because we learned so much about how creative culture could be engaged and how it could be, you know, flourish. And our whole idea was to support it and showcase it. That was kind of the mission of SparkCon. And we had these different sectors of it. And one of the things that we identified was that, you know, Raleigh is extremely diverse, but it's just not very inclusive. And so that became kind of one of our pillars was like, how do we get inclusivity involved? And so it's like, that means stirring the pot, you know, like we have to mix together. And it's interesting because I think that is something parks can be a center of. Because I think it's hard to find places where you can really congregate and be inclusive by design. And I think that's something that a park can do. I think the other part of it is, you know, we took a few years in Australia. It was like, and that overlapped at the pandemic. And we really didn't have much, we didn't suffer much in Australia with the pandemic. So we kind of got lucky to kind of surf that wave of opportunity. But
literally,
when we got back, it was interesting just to sort of see how things had changed with a lot of our friends. And for one, a lot more people knew about the parks because I think they were, you know, outside and all that stuff. But at the same time, socially, we felt like we were pulling people out of their shells a little bit.
That's a good point.
And so I think maybe beyond a park being inclusive by design, I think it needs to maybe be more engaging. I think we need to come back out of our shells and like really start feeling like being connected to each other. And you can't think of a better space than a park to do that.
That's great. And it ties into something Stephen said that caught my attention, which was this idea of indoor and outdoor. I think sometimes with parks, you just have this image right away of this outdoor park, but it's really this engagement, to use your word, Aly, and the idea that it's not necessarily just about being in this outdoor space. And that gets us back to this big umbrella term of parks, recreation, and the cultural aspect. So it's all tying together.
Yeah, and before we jump away from this, for those who don't know, can you give just a real quick, 2-sentence, what is SparkCon? What was it? What did it represent? And, if I'm not mistaken, it hasn't happened for a couple years. Is it coming back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we thought we were completely free and clear of it when we moved to Australia. It's not why we moved to Australia.
Welcome back.
But I think the very nature of this creative festival, which was really, I think, just a completely open source format that's pretty unique in the country, because we never knew exactly what was going to happen with SparkCon. I remember going to the City of Raleigh Arts Commission office, and mentioning that I wanted to do this festival. And they said, what is it going to be? I was like, I don't know. It's process oriented. Isn't that fun? Yeah, that meeting did not last long.
Was there a box on the form to tick for process oriented?
So we had all these sparks. And the first one was just like a community conversation about arts, about technology, about independent business, and about inclusivity. We had these 4 workshops and say, what would it take for, Raleigh to have a thriving creative scene? And it really came because we saw it, I think it was a Money magazine article, that it was the most creative place in the country. And our group at Design Box, which is a bunch of different creative professionals, we'd meet together every Wednesday, and someone brought that, and we're like, oh, really? Like, this is the best it can be? And so we really formed SparkCon to start saying, well, let's, if this, I think it's really in the words of Paul Frederick, the cartoonist, well, Raleigh doesn't have a river, but if it has creativity, then let's claim that. So, and that would not, I couldn't dislodge that thought from my head. So we came up with these workshops. How could we make this area, how could this become the creative hub of the South? And that was our mission. And so there was different sparks, like an art spark, fashion spark, which I think is really where Raleigh Denim got their first big show. And So a lot of really interesting stuff. Circus Spark, which then spawned Cirque du Vol. And so a lot of things that we see around town, it did kind of spark, and that was really fun to see. So eventually it outgrew the kind of thing that I could do. But Sarah Powers and I had started collaborating. The Visual Art Exchange was doing the street painting festival, and she needed some porta-johns, and I was doing a festival, and I needed porta-johns. So we shared some porta-johns, and that's how we met.
Porta-johns at first sight.
It really was. So anyway, it grew over time, and because there was a poetry spark, there's a music spark. A lot of the different festivals that kind of grew out kind of splintered off. But at the beginning, we were kind of one of the ones that were just trying these different communities. I mean, really engaging tattoo artists and piercing as fashion and things like that. So we try to keep pushing the edge about, these different really interesting creative communities and giving them a voice, and also like supporting them. So, what about intellectual property workshops for musicians and things like that? And so as an open source group, we never knew what Spark would be each year. The community decided. We never knew that there'd be a film spark one year, might be not the next year, stuff like that. And what was interesting, though, is that really, I mean, Mayor Meeker, I'm such a big fan, and he was so supportive of everything we did. One of the things that we did ended up leading to the design of City Plaza. So he was really interested in the workshops that we had done and had us then kind of help with that. And next thing we knew, when Fayetteville Street was redesigned, then we started programming SparkCon there. And it was interesting because here's a street that's wide open, and then we just immediately closed it. But
temporarily for the festival. Right?
For the festival. And so over time, it became kind of funny because here we are taking this public space that's really a street meant for parking and has oil stains on it, and we have 700 kids doing chalk painting drawings on that stuff, and it's also a bar during the weekends, so there's other unsightly things on the sidewalks and all that. So you've got kind of a lot of that going on. It's pretty hectic, and in a way, Fayetteville Street became a park.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it also became a little bit of a difficulty for those businesses there because they didn't really form their business there to be on a park. They were there to be on a street that had certain traffic numbers for their bank loans and all that kind of stuff, which makes perfect sense. So where could SparkCon be now? And I think Dreamville kind of opened my eyes. There you can have about the same amount of people kind of taking over a space, and that really kind of opened my eyes to what a park could be.
And for folks who haven't heard of the Dreamville Festival, I mean, what are the numbers? Do we know?
I know someone who knows, and he's sitting at this table.
That was just over 51,000 tickets were scanned.
For that music festival?
Yeah, each day. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wait,
and how many days?
Each day, yeah. 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Over 100,000 people.
Yep.
I have to say, just sitting here and listening to you talk about the origins of SparkCon and because I'm somebody who would just go and see it.
Yeah.
And it's always humbling to meet the people who help design the things, and you realize that they are human, and you almost feel guilty. Like, wow, that must have been a lot on you, because that's such a big, it was such a production.
It's a huge endeavor.
You imagine that I know that you didn't do it alone, and there are a lot of people involved in it, but unless you had an army of like 500 people doing it with you, it's just incredible to see something that can be built or sparked from ideas.
Oh, I learned so much, and I just gained so much respect for the cultures that we have here, the graffiti artists, the break dancers. I mean, just so many different levels, and it just made me feel just so proud to be here, you know?
Sure.
But it was also interesting to see like talent scouts come in from LA saying, okay, I'm going to get a music artist.
Saw
I'm
them
going to
at
get
Slims or something like
right,
that. Yeah.
but also pick up maybe a graffiti artist for the cover, or or something like that. So it's just
Great.
really interesting mix of things, and we really liked those mashups that were happening more and more.
True story. One of my first public engagement speaking events was at SparkCon.
Really?
Yeah.
It really was. And I
Idea
got
Spark.
pulled in. I was like, what is this? I don't know. And it was wonderful. And I've just always been a fan of it ever since. But we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. Welcome back to the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bagley, and I'm here with some pretty amazing people. Wouldn't you say, Sarah?
I would say I'm so tuned into this episode. I forgot we were recording. Honestly, it feels like such a great conversation.
It is a fantastic conversation. And to jump right back into that, I got a question for both of you guys. Raleigh's landscape has changed quite a bit, over the years. Can you tell us about some of the changes that you think have been the most impactful?
Yeah, I mean, change, I think, goes synonymous in Raleigh with growth. So one of the things that we're focusing on from a park system level across the city, because we are growing so fast, is how can we remove barriers? So one thing is transportation. So everybody doesn't own a car, and we have a limited transit system. We can all be honest. It doesn't have the best frequencies, only goes to certain portions of the city. So when we're looking at programs, events, or where we're going to build something or have an event, where is it located next to a transit stop? So as the city does build out and has a more robust transit system, the barrier of access and transportation is the top of ours. The other related to growth, this is probably more number one than the travel and transit, is affordability. So our philosophy and vision in Raleigh's park system is that everybody deserves to go to camp, and fees should not be a barrier. Last year, we gave out scholarships to 1,100 families.
Oh, wow. To 1,100?
1,100 families. But here's the important point. 2 years before that, it was only 700.
Wow.
So when you talk about change and growth, that tells you more people that live in Raleigh now need that support or just the opportunity to take a cooking class or go to a soccer league or take an art class. And what we've found is the acceleration of fee as a barrier to access to our programs is something that we're going to have to face and look at ways in which we can partner with others to reduce that.
Sure. You only have so much money, then it's definitely be some of the
we have a very generous community, so that is great. So that quantifies out to about $180,000 that we gave away in scholarships last year. But we, overall as a park system, we generate $10 million. So that's a very small portion. But if you jump, I guess, the 50% in 1 year for people who said, yes, I actually need financial assistance or a scholarship, that's a red flag that affordability in Raleigh is something that even at a park system, beyond your groceries, your rent, that even to send your child to camp or take an art class, fees are going to be an issue.
Wow, what a cool way to hear you talk about barriers. And so this idea of anything that could be holding someone up from participating. And we've already said this, but the idea of parks not just being this green space that you go to, but all the programming. I know so many families, mine included, that we rely on the camps because they're such a great way to keep our kids involved, especially when there's no school. So the idea of removing barriers and looking across the spectrum of what those barriers could be to make sure that we have participation.
Yeah, it could be language. When I was promoted as director 2 years ago, the number one thing I told our staff, we're a good park system for the suburbs. We're not a great urban park system, and we need to be a better urban park system because people are traveling here from around the world and speak multiple languages. And when I was looking at some of our programs and services, I was pretty critical to say, this is pretty traditional. We're top 10 city in the United States, we're the top in the world, but we need to look at where people are moving from, where people have lived and maybe not had those access to certain events. So yeah, I mean, access and barriers, there's a ton of them that we could go through.
So how do you become better at becoming an urban park system that isn't so suburbia?
You look at great partners. We had, what was it? It was Dia del Niño. It's the Day of the Children. So it's celebrated in Mexico, April 30th. And last year we had it at Peach Road Center. It was small. We had it at Moore Square on Friday, and there was like 600 or 700 people.
Oh, that's amazing.
So you look at different nonprofits around the city and say, hey, we have space, we have a stage, we have music, and we'd love to partner with you on this celebration. And it was packed when I left on 7 o'clock. So it's amazing. Knowing you have space, physical. It might be a building like we're in, or it might just be a flat area, which we know we can pop up a stage and bring in some food trucks. And so not having to do it yourself, it's finding good partners to do it with you.
That's really beautiful to hear, because I think one of the things, you mentioned growth and the challenges of growth, but something that I've always heard from people who have moved to this area is, and it's one of the reasons people move here that's not on the top list of what you normally hear: close to the beach, close to the mountains, relatively affordable on the East Coast. It's the idea that in this community, you can have an impact. If you move here and really immerse yourself in the community and in the potential partnerships, it's a space where you can affect change. If you move to New York City and live there for 15 years and then leave, is the city going to be different because you were there? Maybe. Here, if you are really involved and you've been here for 15 years and you're creating these absolutely, your presence is going to have an effect on the city. And so when you talk about these partnerships, I mean, I don't know if that's something I would have recalled from my early days in the city, but I see it now. I see all the different festivals that we have. I see different programs coming out at parks. And I think it speaks to this idea of why so many people are moving here, which is this is a place where if you want to create partnerships and work within your community, you can do that here.
And we have a track record of it. I'm sitting next to someone who has a great track record of that.
No, absolutely. And that was kind of my next question was going to be for you, Aly. Speaking of partnerships, can you tell us about how you've helped leverage, your neighborhood with Parks and Recreation? What kind of collaborations have you done? I mean, obviously, the Kirby neighborhood is the spirit of collaboration, as you mentioned earlier. What does that look like?
Well, I think it just starts off culturally, just people who are open with each other and, willing to deal with differences. It's I think, embracing the diversity, being inclusive and kind and interesting. I mean, I think all of that stuff is just really important to developing a culture that's innovative and creative. And I think there's plenty of that here. And it's been great in our neighborhood. I mean, sometimes like little jokes about threatening to do a parade and things like that can all of a sudden, everyone can embrace it and run with it, which is really how Kirby Derby Day started. So that's
Tell me more.
I'm sorry, you said Kirby Derby.
Kirby Derby Day.
Kirby Derby I have my notes in front of me. You're in say the name of your neighborhood again?
Kirby Street. So it's the Kirby Billiard neighborhood, also known as Pullen Park Terrace.
Okay.
Formerly.
And you have a Kirby Derby Day.
We do. So it's a little event that was put together in our neighborhood that at first was just a parade, just 'cause. And we had...
Wait. Isn't there a story about how that parade happened as well?
Well, I mean, originally it was a little bit of a protest parade because I really didn't want to be neighborhood president.
There it is.
But I mean, it's all kind of in good fun. It was just kind of a funny little comment that kind of came out, but the whole neighborhood embraced it. And we just got all our really creative friends together, So there was a group, there was a really funny element where we were at the old Moonlight Pizza talking about things. And I was with dear friend Carla Ray, and she's like, oh, if there's going to be a parade, there's going to be clowns, and I hate clowns. I'm going to get those clowns. And then Dave Justice, the genius, guy he's a waiter at the time, came walking by. He goes, "What's this? What's this about taking something out on clowns? That's not funny." And so he decided he was going to protect all the clowns So formed an evil clown posse
At the
Kirby Derby Day at this parade, and he showed up with 20-something people with giant super soakers and really scary looking clowns. And they didn't enter the normal way. They jumped over a fence and came into the neighborhood. And it was a really interesting element, which was all the parents saw this evil clown posse show up, and we all took a step back, and all the kids ran to them. And I was like,
of course they did.
That's the difference between being an adult and a kid, is you can tell the difference between an evil clown and a good clown, I think. Because otherwise, I think it's a subtle difference. But anyway, we had just a great time, and it's just walking around this little neighborhood, people dressing up, doing what they want, and one thing just led to another. And one of the things that happened was that on the second one we had, it wasn't Kirby Derby Day, it was Bride of Kirby Derby Day. So we had all these themes about brides.
Name change.
So we created a Bridezilla. So, this giant Godzilla with a wedding veil. I think she's about 8 or 9 feet tall. And at some point later on in the year, she was absconded with. She was living behind our house, and all of a sudden someone took her and started photographing her all around Raleigh.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. So then we had to search for the bride of Kirby Derby.
Is there some kind of club or something that I need to join to hear these stories?
Yeah.
So wait, just to do a quick recap, you and some people in your neighborhood decided to have a festival. There became this natural occurrence of an evil clown posse. And then by year 2, there was some kind of Bridezilla, Godzilla mascot that ended up becoming this thing that people would like you steal the gnome and take pictures of it traveling around the world. Okay,
Nice.
so that only happened in the first 2 years, and I still haven't heard anything about a derby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Every year kind of had its own thing. So then it was the search for Bridezilla. So year 3, now we had our theme already done for us because we were trying to find out where she went. I think we tried to issue an Amber Alert for Bridezilla. But it just kept going, and by the 5th year, then it was like, oh, what's the theme this year? It was Mach 5. And so for Mach 5, all of a sudden we had derby racers. We had little soapbox derby racers.
Derby.
And so, over the years, just different things have gotten added on. So with the derby, we also added some pine wood car, like the Boy Scout wooden pine blocks
on
that
the
you make
tracks.
on the tracks.
Right.
So we added that. And then at the time, we also decided, we're in the South, so we need to have drag racing. So you have to cross-dress and speed walk.
Love it.
And so that was pretty good. And so anyway, over the years, there's always a different theme. And so we went on, and this little neighborhood event just kind of grew until, Dan, you and I kind of got involved thinking about, well, can this be something that the city actually claims to some level?
Yeah, no, I was, first, I think what people don't realize is this was almost an event that was kind of done in secrecy too. That was amazing because you just didn't really know when it was going to be, and then it just popped up. And
we did get permits.
Yeah.
But that was about it. We actually didn't tell, you're right, we didn't tell people when it was going to happen because it was already getting too big.
Right.
Yeah. It was already just a lot of people.
And again, this is homegrown from your neighborhood. Some people who just like
Homegrown.
each other and want to hang out, and they decided to make this festival that turns into this crazy themed, it sounds like, party. And so then I'm turning to you physically, and then you got involved.
My role was minimal. Aly and their crew, the neighborhood, already had everything put in place. What amazed me was in neighborhood enrichment, we're out there trying to seek the community, to be with the community, to hear from the community. And here's this little neighborhood of 29 homes that had several thousand people on a block and a half rooting on different people who built all these amazing Kirby carts based around a theme. And I was hooked. I was in. And I saw that this needed to continue. And once it, 1 year it did get really, really big, and lawns, were just get tore up from this event. And so it came to the point where, and I believe you coined it, kind of a gift to the city. And I thought that was a really great idea. And then we started working with Parks and Recreation, Cultural Resources, to move it over to Dorothea Dix Park.
Wow.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a nice little thing because I remember we applied for that Neighborhood USA
Oh, that's right.
award, and we brought home silver for that.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, okay, if we're doing that, then by this time it really is a civic event. And it just seemed like a real natural time to start saying, okay, is there a place we can do this where it's a little bit better set up than people tromping through our flower beds and whatever else.
And what a wonderful collaboration between PRCR and the neighborhood.
Yeah.
What a cool example. And again, I just have to say, like, where else does something like this happen? Raleigh is unique in that you can have this connection in your neighborhood that turns into this outpouring of excitement for a festival that then ends up attracting the eye of the city and saying, how can we help with this?
Right.
Well, I've always kind of joked as like, if Raleigh, is it laissez-faire or is it lazy and fair? And it's like, it's somewhere there. You can really, like you're saying, like if you have the gumption and you have the drive to do it and you can find a supportive network, then you can really have some fun.
Yeah,
you can really
I
do
agree.
some stuff and be innovative. And it's like, I grew up in New York. There's no way you could do that kind of stuff. You can never just get past the sanitary workers or, whatever.
Right.
Like you wouldn't be able to get through the unions and everything else. And here it's like, it really is wide open. We have an incredible opportunity.
We do.
And if we just have some basic infrastructure, like you're mentioning, like some open space for stages, or like, when we had 700 kids taking over the streets, I mean, how wonderful it would be to have a place in a park that we could have 700 kids do street painting and things like that. So I think it's time for the parks to, and I guess I just love that the idea that you already have culture kind of built into the park, but it's time for parks to take that step and to be engaging. And we need to do that because with density, we're going to have less and less spaces, and we're going to be able to close down streets less often, and all that stuff gets more expensive. So it's time for parks to like kind of step up and help us through this next stage of growth.
And it's that big idea. I mean, we are talking about what this podcast is about, not to get, too meta or to where you're talking about the thing you're talking on, but we're called Big Ideas Raleigh. And it's this idea that this is a space where big ideas can happen. And we just heard a great example of one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And we need to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. Welcome back to the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast. We're going to jump in with a new question. Let's take this in a different direction. I'd love to know, what role do you see parks playing in addressing pressing issues like sustainability, equity, and resilience in Raleigh?
Yeah, I touched upon the environmental aspect
Yeah.
earlier, so I don't know. I can build off that. One thing I would say is we just, as a community, approved a $275 million parks bond.
That's amazing.
So we talked a little bit about carbon footprint, so we'll say all these facilities will now have to be at a LEED level. The city would had kind of smaller parameters around that.
Can you explain what LEED is?
It's essentially saying that buildings that you build meet certain criteria and are looking to the future from water consumption, electricity consumption, and your overall carbon footprint. So big kudos that the aquatics facility that we'll build at Chavis will be at a LEED silver level or more. The other thing that I think is even more exciting is that voluntarily, I guess it's not voluntarily because as the parks director, I've directed it, that every project in this bond will use green stormwater infrastructure, which we use GSI. So most people on this call probably know this, the water goes into the pipes so underneath the ground after it rains and it shoots out to the streams.
Right.
We've worked with our engineering department to say, hey, we would like to capture that water and put it back into the ground versus sending it to a pipe, sending it to a river, and flooding a community that probably doesn't, even know they're going to be flooded. Wow. So that's huge for us. We've essentially self-mandated it. It's not required by the state. It's not required by the city. So I'm super excited about that. From an equity standpoint, as long as I have been here, a lot of times we would spend money on the loudest voice or specifically where growth is. We now use a lot of data and analytic tools to look at where we haven't historically spent money, and then look at neighborhoods that might be high rental, disproportionately Black and brown. So we're using data much more to inform where we should be spending our money. So I talked about affordability earlier and people that have barriers to transportation. So we now have a much more intentional way in which we take our money annually and say, oh, this is where we should be spending our money. And I think it's going to make a much broader impact on our community.
Wow, that's huge. And you
Right.
you talked earlier about barriers to participating, but I think a barrier to attracting funding to your area, to your neighborhood, could be if you have the time and resources to speak up and ask for it. And so
Yeah.
the idea that you're removing that as a barrier and
Yeah.
using data to that's powerful.
It's very powerful. Data, most recent project we did is we looked at where the warmest neighborhoods are in Raleigh.
Oh, sure.
So like the heat island effect, which means that there's probably not a lot of trees, or the trees were cut down, or no one came in and said, hey, do you want a tree in front of your house? So we layered that information, and then I had our staff go out and say, where is every street tree in Raleigh? And put those on top of one another, and notice that disproportionately neighborhoods in Southeast Raleigh, it was warmer and they did not have trees.
Wow.
So now we're committed to planting several thousand trees in certain neighborhoods in Raleigh. But all of that comes with community engagement, right?
Sure.
Because we have learned really quick in year one, when we were planting trees, people would be like, whoa, I don't want a tree in front of my house. You're going to require me to maintain it, right? So this second year we went out, we did door hangers and letters and had little pop-ups. And out of the 400 trees we planted, I think 7 or 8 people said, nah, I don't want one. And that was because, whereas the first year, a lot more people said, no, I don't want the tree, or were mad that we put a tree in front of
Because
their
they
house.
weren't a part. We
Right.
have that
They weren't
phrase,
a part of that
process.
Yeah.
People support a world they help create. And
Yep.
so
That's the
when
truth.
you're inviting folks into that, and not even inviting isn't even the right word, it's that engagement. And I think it's so cool that we talked about how the data can reduce this barrier of if I'm not speaking up, if I'm not showing up at council meetings, if I'm not asking loudly, then am I going to get the attention? So data removes that barrier, but then we still have to involve people in
That's
the
right.
process, is
Yeah.
what you were sharing. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what amazes me too is it isn't just parks and recreation. You know, like the old thought of, oh, you build a playground, you put in
That's right.
some monkey bars. You know, it's so much more. You actually went out and you looked to see where every tree was in a street.
Yeah, if a
That's
tree
incredible.
falls down in the street in Raleigh, the Parks Department picks up that tree, cuts it, and moves it. And so most people wouldn't think that we have an urban forestry section within the city, and that's actually embedded in the park system.
So, Aly, how do you see your role as a patron? You know, looking at how we address issues like sustainability, as Stephen was just talking about.
Yeah, well, listen, I think I was mentioning before carbon budgeting. I think we can do that as citizens as well. And I mean, just some rough calculations that I did. If I look at Dix Park and how much carbon is being sequestered by the growth that's there, and someone should check my numbers, but it looks like it can offset the convention center carbon footprint by about 15%.
Okay.
So, I mean, think about it. Is there a way that you could take all the parks and have it designed to inset, not offset, but to inset, to actually capture the carbon that all city services generate?
Wow.
Can we be like a net positive city with our own operations? And that would then guide us in terms of what kind of choices we make about what we plant, what we use, LEED certification, green roofs. But like if we have that hallmark that we don't want to contribute to the problem, that we want to be part of the solution as a city that we can all be proud of, then I think parks are a really, really powerful opportunity for us.
What would a first step look like for something like that?
I think we need to take an inventory. I think we need to understand how much carbon we're sucking in. And it's more than carbon, because the stormwater is extremely important. Toxicity of some of the materials that we're using. I mean, we can go on and on. I worked with William McDonough for a couple of years, and I am totally brainwashed on cradle to cradle thinking. And I think
course.
that's the Bible to go to. But
You just said so many things I don't understand.
sorry,
He's much smarter
good
than
at this,
me.
am I?
Well, I can tell you what I did understand. I love this idea of a carbon budget. And you were talking about making decisions, and you just said something about how if we had more of an inventory, and it strikes me, I mean, we would never make a decision about building a building or a structure without knowing what our budget is, our
Right.
financial budget. And so this idea of, do we understand our carbon budget? What a cool language switch that you use there. And I'm even thinking for my family, do I have a carbon budget? As we consider our purchases, our travel, our activities, am I thinking about our carbon budget? That's really powerful. Now, you you then said, I think you said somebody's name and then cradle to cradle.
Oh, right.
Yeah. What was that?
Oh, so I mean, cradle to cradle to me is like probably the go-to Bible for sustainability in my book. And William McDonough lives in Virginia and is the author of that book, and I've been working with him. So really been able to just interface with so many really important, interesting people. LEED certification kind of came from William McDonough's work. So
that's fascinating.
So there's a lot of really, there's some great information we can rely on that I think have been really globally accepted as, ways that we can describe things, because it does start with language, but also the kinds of goals and metrics that we set for ourselves. So yeah, I mean, let's use the parks as that carbon sponge at the very least for all city services. Let's let the city have forget net zero. Let's be net positive. We have to account for, years of not being net positive, right? Yeah. So we got to start reversing stuff. And nobody really wants to work to zero because zero is depressing. So forget net zero. Yeah. Let's be net positive. Let's have our children really inspired, and let's leave our children with, a
better place.
With a really better place. Yeah, with some optimism. And let's not talk about reducing or having our carbon budget. Let's talk about, no, this is the way forward. This is something inspiring. We're glad you're here. We don't want you to be zero.
Well, we're glad the city of Raleigh has both of you as members of our society, because you both make it a much, much better place.
And what a cool table to sit across an employee and then somebody who's a resident, and just hearing about the partnerships. It's just been really powerful. I echo Dan. I'm thankful both of y'all are here.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is we're going to play another game. And I'm a little upset that you beat me on the last game, all three of you. And so we're going to play a game called the Sound Around. So I'm going to play a sound for you, and you have to tell me what it is. I will give you a hint, but after the sound.
Okay.
So are you guys?
Are we playing against Sarah again?
You're playing against Sarah.
Or are we
again.
independent like the three of us?
Do you want to be independent?
Normally it's, so I'm going to challenge our guests. So y'all can work on a team. I'll work independently.
Okay.
I think with facts and a false, we just kind of beat Dan. But
you did.
Y'all can try to
you
beat me on this.
All three of you beat me. But this one, I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay.
Is it going to be the call of a painted bunting?
Don't ask me that.
No.
Beautiful bird, but don't ask me that.
That's all I got.
I know.
Here we go.
Okay.
Listen closely, by the way.
Okay.
Now,
I have to go first, and then after I go, you guys can get a hint and then beat me, because I have so many guesses, but I'm guessing that's not me brushing my teeth inside a tunnel. Like that's my first instinct.
A good guess, but no.
So, it kind of sounded like something motorized, like maybe a toy my kids would be playing with outside. Maybe I'm going to say it's like one of those wind-up cars driving down the street. Maybe you picked that because, the Kirby Derby, and that's going to be my guess.
That could be a tie-in.
All right.
You might be right.
Would you like to go ahead and guess, or do you want
Or it
Dan's
might not
hint?
be.
What were you thinking?
It sounded animal-like to me, didn't it?
At the end, it sounded animal-like. I thought when it started, it sounded like when you roll the wheel on Price is Right. Went. So your guess about the pull it and the car goes got my head thinking, but at the end, it kind of went.
Yeah.
And there's this chirping birds in the background too, right? There's some kind of noise, some kind of chirping, or some kind of.
Been.
So it's something. It was outside.
Do you want to go ahead and guess, or do you want the hint?
I'm happy to give you a hint.
Wait. No, you guessed without the hint. That wouldn't be fair.
Okay, I tell you what. Guess, and then I will give you guys the hint.
Okay.
If she isn't right. She might be.
So you're thinking animal?
Yeah, maybe a call of something like, I don't know. It was too long for a frog.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
A painted bunting?
A very big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All three of you are incorrect.
Okay.
I feel vindicated. Now, here is your hint. Dorothea Dix Park,
Okay.
large open field.
It's not a drone. We're not allowed to have drones at Dix Park. We are allowed to have drones at Dix Park?
It is. Yes.
It's a drone. I'm going to say a drone.
Okay.
I am going to say something to do with Dreamville.
Okay.
The crowd at Dreamville.
Okay. Okay, that is a good guess.
Right.
Ooh, I like that. That was a good guess.
Don't let him pull you down that rabbit hole.
No, but I'm gonna. I'm thinking maybe it's. I have another one. Oh, you have another one?
I think it hit.
Yeah.
I know it hit.
Okay. No, you go.
Not now.
It's a holiday that we have there.
What'd you say?
What?
The big holiday that we had, besides Dreamville, I was going to say the
July
4th of
4th?
July because, like, it's not it. It's not it.
No.
Okay. Oh, he just said it's not it.
No. Sorry.
I'm wondering if it's like because there's a lot of model airplanes that fly out there on Sundays. So I'm wondering if it's like something. Yeah, something. I usually call that area the landing strip. So I'm thinking it's a vehicle at the landing strip.
It is an RC plane.
Okay.
Remote controlled plane. That was it. So, Sarah, you were always
I
there.
feel like I was close.
Yeah.
But you know what they say to the person who was close to the finish line but didn't cross it? Nothing. They crossed the finish line. Great job, Aly.
You're going to be okay.
Well done. That was a good sound.
Yeah, that was a good
thanks.
one.
I tried to find something close
Wow.
to the neighborhood in the parks. I'm feeling pretty good about that one.
Good deal.
But thank you for playing. And now you have we have time for one more question. And the last question before we close the show is, what's something we haven't asked you that you'd love to tell the people of Raleigh? You know, what is that future big idea that you might have coming?
Well, I'm going to jump in, and it sounds bad, but I'm going to go back to what Aly talked about, is that how can the city look at itself, especially we have 10,000 acres, and offset our carbon footprint through being highly intentional with the park system. I think it's brilliant. I mean, we do things, strategically or little tactical ones, but looking at it much more from a comprehensive way. We do have a climate plan in our Office of Sustainability, and Megan Anderson's amazing, I think. But I'm gonna not steal. I'm gonna co-endorse.
Let's partner on that.
Yeah.
I feel a partnership brewing.
Yeah, I like that.
Wow. So there's the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast where we talk about big ideas, and sometimes we make big ideas.
Big ideas happen.
So that inspires something I've been wondering a lot about. So as I walk around Dorothea Dix Park quite a bit, I'm looking at a lot of trees that are 75 to 100 years old. And it occurred to me, someone put those there 75 or 100 years ago, and I'm thankful for what they did. And I'm wondering what we're doing that someone will be thankful for 75 or 100 years from now.
Great question.
Yeah.
Because in 2 weeks, we will take $1 million grant that we got from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to increase our urban forestry canopy, and we're going to focus on parks. We like even more in Nash Square. We are planting now for that next generation, but Dix Park will be one.
That's great.
We'll also look at, like I said, the heat island and equity map, so those neighborhoods that historically have not had shade trees. So yeah, exciting time for trees in Raleigh.
Wow.
Yep.
I really love this. And I think my big idea, my thing I'm walking away with is just this importance of connection. I'm so inspired, Aly, by your neighborhood story. And it makes me want to go meet, like you said, Stephen, I want to meet more of my neighbors and see what kind of, I don't know if I'm going to be hosting any kind of derby or having any kind of bridezilla. Definite no on the clown posse. That is a hard stop for me.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some things in my neighborhood. And I love this expanded idea of parks and recreation and cultural resources and indoor and outdoor. It's not just the play spaces. It is that and so much. And so I'm inspired to bring that conversation to my neighborhood and my neighbors. And
Well, we'd love to invite every neighborhood to Kirby Derby Day. We have participation with a lot of neighborhoods, and our intention is to make it a real neighborhoods event. So we'd really love to have everyone participate one way or the other. And also, there's one other thing that really occurred to me. I was just thinking about it. While living in Australia, the one thing I really loved about parks there is they were whole family parks.
Multi-generational.
Yeah, and so while kids were on the jungle gym, they had exercise bikes in a ring all the way around. So you're getting your workout while they're getting their workout.
Yeah.
Watching
So
the
I
kids.
think, adult playground or family playground where everyone gets to play all at the same time, and you don't have one person just being a custodian or sitting and watching, but everyone's participating.
I love that.
Would love to see more of that.
It's interesting. The type of play equipment we now put in appeals to the parents as much as the kids. You go over to Chavis and half the parents are climbing on that tower over there. And I'm like, oop. And the only people who have gotten stuck are parents.
Oh, I love it.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for being with us today. It's truly an enlightening conversation. I learned a great deal. And as Sarah said, I come away inspired when we get to listen to folks such as yourself and your ideas. So thank you for your big ideas.
Thank you so much. And I'm bringing my neighborhood to the Kirby Derby 2024. And it's in August, right?
It is in August.
All right.
Do we have a theme?
The theme is games people play.
Games people play. Oh, now I'm excited.
So many ideas.
There it is. It just flows right with, parks and recreation.
It does.
I love it. Well, Stephen and Aly, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. Give us a follow. Find Big Ideas Raleigh podcast on any podcast app or on YouTube. We've got more great episodes coming your way as we dive deep into the heartbeat of your Oak City. And hey, if you have any ideas for a podcast, let us know. Visit our podcast page to learn how you can share your ideas with us. We'd love to hear from you. A special shout out to the production team behind this podcast, Earfluence, a Raleigh-based podcast production company. Learn more at earfluence.com. This podcast was brought to you by the City of Raleigh's Office of Strategy and Innovation, also known as the Office of Yes and the City of Raleigh's Communication Department. I'm Dan Bagley, here with producer Dr. Sarah Glova, and we'll see you next time on the Big Ideas Raleigh podcast.